Hey everybody, how you doing? Tony Penn, results-driven leadership. Today's topic is actually about employee buy-in, which is my favorite topic, mainly because almost everything else we talk about in this training session and as well as in our businesses kind of comes down to, is anybody listening? Is anybody connecting? Does anybody really feel like they're part of something? Because we are really good at tricking our brain into thinking that people have bought in and thinking that people understand what the goal is, the mission, the vision, because it's clear in our mind. And we know we're dealing with all different types of human beings, so we understand that it's difficult to make that connection every time. So the purpose of this seminar, of this training session, is to be able to kind of apply some specific tools and ideas and thoughts to be able to ensure that you're going to get the result, you're going to get the outcome that you're looking for. And that's what we're all about. You know, results-driven leadership is really about anything that you do within the realm of your responsibility and your position. Does it achieve the desired outcome? Because we do so much, we work so hard, we put in so much effort. And a lot of times we look at the outcome and we're not happy with it. And I think it's a natural tendency to be able to look outside of ourselves to try to figure out why that is. Did we hire the right person? Did we, do they care enough? Do they understand what I'm saying? As opposed to looking internally. And that's something that I've had to do over the years of being in business and being in a leadership position, where I felt really good about the message that I was communicating and the ideas I was communicating and relaying, but I wasn't seeing the outcome at times. And so I had to start looking at my approach and what it was that I needed to do differently to be able to get the desired outcome. So what we're going to try to accomplish today is we're going to try to give you some tools. I know everybody that's probably looking at this works their ass off, you know, to try to, you know, make sure they put their team in a successful position. You feel like you've done everything to help that individual. You feel like you communicate effectively. You feel like you compensate. You feel like you treat them with respect, but a lot of times you're not getting the result. So what are we going to try to do to help that process and to ensure that we're getting the result that we're looking for? I think the first thing we got to do is try to identify what a lack of buy-in looks like, because a lot of times we don't recognize it because we've tricked our brain into thinking, oh, they're all on board, they're digging it, they're loving this, when in fact, a lot of times they're not. And a lot of times they don't understand what role they play in it, and they don't believe in it. And you won't know that a lot of times because you're in a leadership position where people tell you what you want to hear. And unfortunately, when people tell you what you want to hear, you don't really find out what's going on, and you don't really get that level of buy-in that you need to be able to accomplish the goal. So I think it's important to kind of talk a little bit about what a lack of buy-in looks like. I think you'll recognize some of these things. And then what we'll do is we'll go over 5 steps to be able to help you ensure that you are able to get buy-in, and that you get it in a sustainable manner, because it's a long, systematic process that requires a routine. I think we've all been in that situation where we go to a seminar, for example, and we're super inspired. We go see Anthony Robbins, and you know, doesn't get more inspiring than that. It's very exciting, comes up with some great takeaways. We go back to the office or whatever it is that we work, and we implement those takeaways. We feel good for a couple of weeks about how things are going, and then we're kind of back into the routine. And one of the things that we probably weren't able to do was determine how to sustain that level of inspiration. And so we go back and we kind of get stuck back in our routine, and after 3 or 4 weeks we kind of forget a lot about what was inspiring and what those takeaways were. And we think about them every now and then, but we really don't have the level of buy-in to what we were observing and participating in that would allow us to sustain that over a long period of time. So that's our goal. We want to be able to walk away with some tools that can help us connect a little bit more sincerely and realistically and significantly with our team to be able to get the results that we're looking for. So let's jump into it. What does a lack of buy-in look like? Here's a few examples of what that buy-in looks like. We've all seen these. I think apathy is one of those where employees just don't ever want to take ownership. They don't ever take on any responsibility. Very rarely do they ever volunteer for anything. They just want to do their job and go home. And that's one of those common concepts that's out there where, people feel it's okay to come to work and separate and balance their home life. But it's very difficult to get significant results accomplished when people really are apathetic and really don't feel like there's any ownership in anything that they do. So apathy is something you'll see quite often. Minimum effort, people that always put themselves in a situation where you have to motivate them, you have to constantly inspire them. It's obvious that you're not inspiring them, or you wouldn't have to continue to do so. But it's just, do whatever. What's the least I can do? That's kind of another sign that there's lack of buy-in. The worst is that I've seen out there is only telling you what you want to hear, which is the passive aggressive employee. They're the ones that are constantly agreeing with everything that you say, supporting you while you're there. And then as soon as you walk away, they're done. And not only at times are they done, but sometimes they take that passive aggressiveness to another level and they're talking to other employees about how they don't agree or what they disagree, don't like about some of the objectives or some of the things that you're trying to place into the organization. So they'll be pissed off a lot of times and you'll just never know it because they'll be your best friend when you're around. And those are the ones that I think create more damage than anything else with regards to being able to accomplish things and getting the result that you're looking for. I come from the restaurant industry, and there's a lack of buy-in that happens all the time because of most of the time you're dealing with people that aren't full-time employees. So this is just either a springboard job or a job while they're going to school or just something to pay some bills until they find something better. So getting buy-in is extremely difficult. But I remember one time when I was a general manager of an Outback steakhouse, and there was a regional manager that would come in, and he would enjoy when people were passive with him or appreciated him or agreed with him. So there would always be this dog and pony show anytime this guy would come into the building, because that's what he wanted. But he never really got a true sense of what was happening. He never really understood what was going on behind the scenes, because everything was sunshine and roses when he was there. Everybody kissed his rear end. The place always looked cleaner. And then he went in for his 4 or 5 hours and left, feeling like everybody was on board. When in fact, we all know that wasn't the case. And when I got into his position, both at with that company and beyond, I wanted it to be completely opposite. I wanted them to feel extremely comfortable with me. being able to walk in and tell me what was actually going on, so that there was no dog and pony show. And we'll talk a little bit about how you can accomplish that later in this in the training. The last one is, that cynical employee that just just doesn't believe in what he's doing, doesn't believe that he or she plays any significant role in it, and they feel obligated to let other employees know that, and they feel obligated to make other employees feel bad when they are putting in forth that effort, and that creates a lot of anxiety and animosity within an organization. And so as we start to kind of move into the next phase of this training, which is, well, how do we overcome all of this? What is it that we can do? Because a lot of times you look at this and you're like, what am I supposed to do about this? Because it's very difficult, by the way. It's difficult, I mentioned the restaurant industry. It's difficult in any industry, even if you're working with career people that plan to be there for the rest of their lives. Things like apathy and passive aggressiveness is common, especially with people that hate confrontation, which there's a lot of them out there. So let's talk about those 5 steps that we were referring to earlier. And the first one, I think, is extremely important. Identify and prioritize your vision, which we're going to talk about in a second. The second one is communicate your vision through a collaborative process and an inclusive process. You got to be able to implement the ideas to ensure that there is commitment, and you got to hold everybody accountable. Once you've done all that, then you have to establish a consequence. So either the consequence is that things aren't happening, or the consequence is that they are, and you have to celebrate that. So let's move on to step 1. Identify and prioritize your vision for success. And what does that even look like? Because a lot of times we think we've painted a clear picture. We think that there's clarity, what the expectations are, the goals, objectives, and we have it super clear in our head. But the fact is that if we're not achieving the desired outcome, then it's possible that we weren't as clear as we thought we were. So we have to be able to paint a clear picture of what being successful in that company looks like. And then we have to have priorities, because we tend to gravitate to things that we think people can achieve, or expectations that they can achieve, or objectives, or a vision that they can easily understand, instead of taking the responsibility of doing a better job of communicating what that is. And we have to create whatever it is, that roadmap to get there. Because a lot of times it's not just about telling somebody. And I think I use the example of going to a seminar. You've communicated effectively at that seminar, but if you haven't created that roadmap on how to be able to utilize that information and get the result, then it's going to go away. So we got to understand what our priorities are. And then finally, which is one that in my experience gets left out all the time. And it got left out when I was coming up through the ranks, which is how whatever we're working on, whether it's an objective or an overall vision or a specific task, we struggle a lot of times with making sure that we have a compelling purpose for the team. What does it mean to me as an employee or someone that works for you? What is in it for me? And nobody really ever says that, especially on your team, because they realize that that's just not part of how you belong in an organization, especially when you're not in a leadership position. But it's extremely important because they're thinking it. Everybody's thinking it. You're thinking it with regard to whoever you report to. Anytime something comes down the pike, you're like, what is I understand what needs to be done. I get it, how it benefits the company, but how does it benefit me? And there's things that you can do to ensure that there is a purpose for your team or individuals within your team. Compensation is one of them. I mean, understanding that there is a tie-in to the results that you get and the compensation you receive, and making it very clear. For me, it was always about, especially when I was dealing with people that were in management positions, was it had to do with profit sharing. I found that the word bonus doesn't carry the weight that it used to carry. Now, sometimes you're in a situation where you can't do that, but I always wanted to be able to create a scenario where I knew what success looked like, and I could communicate, this is what success looked like. You can even look at it from the aspect of a bottom line. And you look at that bottom line and say, if we achieve that, we're successful. Now, what role do the individuals play in that? How do you get some of that success? And anything above and beyond that, what role can you play and what can you achieve and receive as part of that success? So just something to think about. There's other ways other than compensation. Recognition is extremely underrated. Just being able to recognize people in a variety of different ways, not just patting them on the back or shaking their hand, but making a big deal out of it when the objectives and the vision is met or are met. So if you're doing that on a regular basis, people feel that there's a little bit more buy-in, and they feel a little bit more part of something. Advancement, having a clear roadmap and path to getting to the next level, whatever that next level is. The next level doesn't necessarily have to be a promotion to, your level or in a position of authority. Advancement could be just something, maybe it's somewhere else in the company that they want to work. It could be just being able to learn more about a variety of things, what they do, what others do. Something like this, being able to have some level of advanced learning, to learn things that they weren't normally in a position to learn, is something that as an employee, I feel like I benefit from. And it's more of an inspiration for me to want to help get to that point where we are successful as a company, because I understand how it benefits me and I understand the role I play in getting those results. So step one is identify and prioritizing your vision for success. Step two, which is really probably the most important and most difficult for most people to accomplish, which is to be able to communicate what those objectives are through a collaborative and inclusive process. Most of the time, we dictate what we think needs to happen, and then we kind of roll the dice and hope for the best. But if we're not able to actually have a good symmetry with another human being and have good two-way communication that includes involving them in the process, and includes listening and collaborating with an open mind, so that we can discover that there may be different ways to achieve the goals that we talked about in step one. If we are able to do that, we're able to make that connection, then I think we have a better shot at getting the results that we're looking for. And I know we'll have a better shot at being able to get some buy-in. So I put down on here some tips that help make that collaborative process a little bit more effective. And the first one is listening, which is very difficult, by the way, especially when we're busy. It's just hard to truly listen. But I can tell you from my own personal experience that the whole employee buy-in process came from the reality of a situation. And the reality of the situation was I was put in a leadership position in a restaurant on the other side of the country where I really didn't know anybody. I walk into just a complete disaster where the inmates were running the asylum, and I was asked to fix it. I wasn't even the general manager. I was a service manager in charge of the waiters and the bussers and the hostesses. And the general manager was a super sweet guy, but just not very aggressive, very passive. And so the world just kind of rolled him over there. And these servers were running the show. And I walked in and I was just aghast, I guess, at how bad things were running. But these three servers were making all the money because they were basically controlling the flow of the restaurant. So I asked the head server, the lead server, and I said, what's up? How does this work? And he told me not to worry about it, to go sit back in my office and do my manager stuff because they had it under control. Well, they clearly didn't. So the next day, I did the lineup card. I put everybody in different positions. I gave that to the hostess. I came back once the shift was about to begin, and everything was switched back to the way the server wanted it. And I walked up again and I said, what exactly do you think you just did? And he said, I told you to go back in the office and we would handle it. And I said, well, why don't you come back in the office and explain to me how it is that you handled it and how you're going to handle it. So he came back in the office and I basically told him to hand over all this stuff and to leave the restaurant because he was fired, which his mind was blown. Cut to a few more people left, a few more people were terminated, and I was stuck with half the staff that was there. And we sat around at a table and I didn't know what to do because now we have to basically run a restaurant with half the staff that we had. The good news was the staff that was there cared and wanted it to do well. So I just kind of threw it out there. What are we going to do? And all of a sudden the ideas just started popping. One person's going to take care of the training materials. Another person knew some people that they could bring in. Another person was going to reorganize the bar. I mean, it was just like all these ideas came flooding to me. And we just started working it. And within a few months, we had that thing dialed in. And it didn't come from any dictation. It came from collaboration. And it came from me asking the team, what can we do to achieve the result, which was, in that case, survival. And everybody understood the vulnerability of the situation. And so they trusted each other. They trusted me. I wasn't there to do anything but try to make this work so we could all prosper. And so we created this environment where people trusted each other. And then the big part of it was just following up and making sure that all the things that we agreed upon were getting done. And the last thing, which again, happened organically in this particular situation, which I then, once I saw what the results were, I was like, I'm doing this everywhere and I'm going to make it more organized, more structured because this works. And it wasn't something I read in a book. It was something that I experienced by getting my ass handed to me. And the last thing on there was to ensure that I created those opportunities for collaboration. And I had to become much more structured. Tuesday, 3 o'clock, let's sit down. Let's talk about what we talked about from the previous discussion. Where are we at with the training materials? Where are we at with the hiring? What's the guest response and reaction? So there was a whole series of things that happened from that desperation that existed. So it became, a Bible for me with regard to how I was able to make that connection. In 3 months, the turnaround in 3 months was something that I had never experienced before. The vice president came in, who basically, when I started there, was like, yeah, this place is a mess, do what you can, was just amazed. And he promoted me instantly when he saw what was going on, even though I was not ready to be promoted. But it was just such a dramatic turnaround, and it came from that process of getting that buy-in and, collaboration. So I think what we'll do now is we'll take a break and come back with the next video and talk about implementing some of these ideas and validating the process, because it's very difficult to continue and sustain that level of buy-in without validating the process. Talk to you in a minute.